Welcome to the Authentic Deb podcast. I'm Debbie, and I'm your host for All Things Authentic. This podcast exists to bring people just like yourself from all over the world to share our stories, laugh at ourselves, and encourage each other along the way. Get ready to laugh, cry, and be empowered, but most of all to be you, because being you is enough. Well, thanks for joining another episode of the Authentic Deb podcast. Today, I have Pastor Doug Sewell with me, and we're going to talk about Can You Pray the Gay Away, which is another installment of the series we are doing, a really important issue. I've known Doug for, I want to say, close to 20 years.
About 13 years. I think we met in 2007 at Dale Jarrett's church.
Oh, okay. Well, see,
I don't think we met in 2001 when I first got hooked up with Randy. I think we didn't meet till 2007.
Oh, okay. Well, see, Doug knows, and Debbie's only on her second cup of coffee, and that's my excuse. So without further ado, Doug, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you're about, and we'll jump right into today's subject.
Okay, I'm Pastor Doug Sewell, as Debbie said. I live right now in Youngstown, Ohio. I've been here all my adult life. I've been a pastor for a little over 10 years and a Bible teacher for well over 20. I actually started teaching Bible in the late 70s and started going to schools then. But I took some detours, and we're going to probably talk about that over the course of this discussion.
Well, yeah, we all take detours, that's for sure. Now, you're a pastor, so did you grow up in a particular faith, or did you come into a faith in Christ at a later time in your life?
My parents raised me in church. We attended various denominations and churches because my dad, we moved a couple of times. We attended a Lutheran church. My dad was Lutheran and my mom was Methodist.
Okay.
So we attended a Lutheran church up until about fourth grade. We moved to central Pennsylvania and attended a Brethren church for a few years. And then we attended a Methodist church when we moved to Ohio. Had a good pastor, and it was real close to the home. I could even walk there. And but the gospel message didn't quite sink in. I figured out I was gay when I was 13, but it was a friend's conversion in about the time I was 16, and noticing that it actually made a change, that I asked him some questions, probably about about a month after my 17th birthday. And I had a chance where I could ask him some questions and find out what was going on with him. And I came to Christ during that time frame, and I got involved in the charismatic. This is during the charismatic movement in the mid-70s. So I was attending Spirit-filled churches and later a Word of Faith church. And I developed a real love for the word. I was listening to Kenneth Hagin and Kenneth Copeland every day on the radio. And I actually went to see them a couple of times in person. But I developed a love for the word back then.
So
I had a love-hate affair with being gay at the same time.
That's what I was going to ask. So when did you know right away, since you said that you knew that you were gay or different at the very least at 13, and then you came into a relationship with Christ? And I think it was important that you said, which is probably for a different podcast, but did you notice a change in your friends? So that's probably a rabbit trail podcast somewhere else as far as what people need, what people see in us that causes them to ask questions. But for the sake of this topic, especially getting into the charismatic movement and Word of Faith and all of that, which are really, pretty stringent about those boxed in beliefs about, people with sexual orientation, same sex. How did you, especially as a young man, because you were still pretty young, what was going through your head? How did it affect you, or did it affect you?
Well, I largely stayed closeted. There were very few people that I actually told about it. A couple of close friends, like one of my college buddies, Rich, actually have reconnected with him over the years by way of Facebook. but I had this love and hate affair with being gay from the time I came to Christ up through probably about the mid 80s. Now, interesting, the first week I was at college, some friends of mine from church wanted me to get involved in InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. And it was a good organization at the time. It probably still is, although they've taken a strong anti-gay stance the last few years. But I went to the InterVarsity meeting one day, and then the next day I ended up somehow in a casual encounter with someone. And at the end of that encounter, I says, yeah, I feel really guilty about this because I'm a Christian. I don't feel like I should be doing this. And this guy, his name was Bill. He says to me, I know, I saw you at the InterVarsity meeting yesterday.
So you were in a sexual encounter or just a mentally, emotionally?
No, this is a one-off sexual encounter.
Oh, one-off sexual encounter. Okay.
Yeah,
so he was a Christian as well.
Yes, yeah, he was, and we became good friends on a non-intimate basis. We both talked about, trying to not be gay and various things. We went down to one of the big full gospel churches in the area and got hands laid on us. That didn't work.
Oh, okay.
He got married. That didn't work. But anyway, and we actually recently reconnected together on Facebook also.
I think that's what you told me about. You just reconnected, right? Okay.
Yeah. So up until probably from the late 70s, well, 77 when I started college through till probably about 84 or so, I was somewhat promiscuous. I would go out Saturday nights and somehow make it home and make it to church Sunday morning. The one thing that really helped me though was I never started drinking. Yeah. I just decided in my teens that would just make my life all the more complicated after watching some of my friends. So I never started drinking. So that was one thing that helped me out. But around about 84 or so, I had some unpleasant experiences that pushed me from that back and forth gay Christian thing. Saturday night party, Sunday morning church. And I was in the church Sunday morning, Sunday evening, Wednesday evening, and then I had some unpleasant experiences that kind of pushed me into a don't want to be gay phase.
Okay. And let me ask a question to back up for a second. And I don't want to stereotype gay men or just men in general. A lot of times people talk about gay men being promiscuous or gay people being promiscuous. And I'm like, hello, people are promiscuous. Women are promiscuous. Men are promiscuous, straight, gay, whatever. It doesn't really matter. But gay men kind of get the bum rush on that. When you were out just, in those experiences, did you experience, were you actually, when you went to church the next day, were you, I guess, was there inner conflict in terms of God being angry with you or anything like that? I know that I went through a lot of different phases in my mind. And were you ever angry with God?
I was angry with God at times. Once I got to that don't want to be gay phase, it's like, how did you let this happen? But I usually dealt with the conflict on the way home, however I was, because I spent a lot of time in Akron, which is about 45, 50 minutes from here. And so I would usually try to deal with most of that on the way driving home or driving to the church Sunday morning, because the church that I was attending was anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes away. So depending on which church or what time.
Ask for forgiveness?
I would pray and I would just, but for me, the promiscuity was just because I was looking for self-acceptance.
Okay.
The frequency and the type of person that I hooked up with was a substitute for my own self-esteem. Okay. And so more conquests, etc., gave me a boost.
So was the conquest and the self-esteem not necessarily tied to your orientation, but just a struggle that maybe we all go through with self-esteem, and or was it tied into your struggle with God? You know what I'm saying? Like you said, you don't drink. You didn't drink. I like to have a drink every now and then, but I've seen so many people substitute alcohol for whatever else, or drugs, or for me, food. I'm still dealing with that, the emotional eating. So was the conquest about the orientation, or just about general stuff that your own demons inside that you were dealing with?
I don't know. If I had been straight, I probably would have been married.
Okay.
And hopefully in a sexually active relationship. Although, if kids come in along the way and that,
I know.
but it's very enlightening to be the only person sober in a bar.
Yes.
That was an interesting experience. I learned that someone that's very friendly towards me because they're drunk is not going to be fun for me. But anyway.
Right.
So I had this time, like I says, that I got into this don't want to be gay phase.
Okay.
And that during that time, that was probably 85 or so up till mid 89. During that time, I attended 2 Exodus conferences.
Okay.
One in Nyack, New York, which was about 45 minutes north of New York City proper. I met one of the village people there.
Hey, let me cut in just for our listeners. Not all of our listeners are gay or lesbian. So just real quick, tell our other listeners what exactly the Exodus conference is, just in a nutshell.
Okay. Exodus was an organization largely Christian oriented, focused on helping people stop being gay. And since I was in this don't want to be gay phase, I attended. There were no local Exodus organizations. That's probably fortunate for me. But there were the Exodus conference. I went to one in Nyack, New York, and then I went to the following one, which was probably 87, was 86 and 87, and that one was in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And it's interesting because of the people that I actually met that were in ex-gay ministry back then, none of them but one are still involved in that now.
I was going to say, it sounds like a giant hookup place, because you got a bunch of gay men and women trying to be straight, and they're not.
There was probably about 200, maybe 200 of us there, and some of them were well-meaning straight folk. Many of them were people that claimed to be ex-gay. The only one that's actively involved in that kind of ministry now that I know of is Andy Comiskey. He's actually gotten involved in Restored Hope Network, which is the successor to Exodus, and is much more aggressive.
Oh, wow. So did you do any shock therapy, or what kind of during that phase when you were trying to not be gay and then dealing with, if I remember you saying right, this is when you were angry with God, what kind of things did you deal with internally or externally in terms of trying to pray the gay away?
Okay, well, at this point, since I was trying to not be gay, I was pretty much no longer angry with God at that point. I was just busy trying to please him. And I managed probably close to 5 years of celibacy. Mm-hmm. But, although we had no local Exodus organizations, there was a step program called Homosexuals Anonymous.
Oh, my God.
It was kind of like AA.
Right.
There were 14 steps instead of 12, and the steps were much more explicitly Christian than the AA steps were. But I got involved and actually hosted a local group meeting for several of those years in my apartment. I was really all in on trying not to be gay.
Right.
Yeah, that group wound down for various reasons, and I was involved in church. Started attending Bible school classes at the church I was going to pretty regularly, getting a good Bible education. I had given my testimony for the singles group of the Healed Gay Man. Oh, yeah.
With air quotes, audience. Yeah, air quotes.
Yeah, air quotes, yes. Healed Gay Man. So, but about a year and a half later, I want to say early to mid 89, a couple of things happened in that church, and a couple of things happened in my life. And I really admitted to myself that I couldn't not be gay. I couldn't not be gay. And so what I ended up doing was I ended up moving to the other side of town, getting an apartment the other side of town so I could make an excuse to start attending a different church.
Okay.
I no longer was on the worship. Since I moved away, I had been on the worship team and that, but I decided, if I'm not going to be gay, I'm going to just kind of retreat from this.
So did you retreat from God? Because I know I did.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I did. I stopped attending church, and obviously since I wasn't at the same church, I wasn't on the worship team, and various things. So I went through about a 5-year period, mid 89 till probably late 94, where I attended one church service. I was at an MCC, and that particular MCC was quite underwhelming. And it was an hour and a half away.
Yeah, it can be.
So
no reason to go back.
So I didn't go back. But then, round about early November or so, I heard rumors of a local gay-pastored, gay-friendly church starting in Warren, which is the next city over from where I live in Youngstown. And I heard about it, and I discreetly asked some questions about where they're meeting and that. And so Christmas Eve, 1994, I went to All Saints Community Church. I knew one or two, maybe three people there. At this time, the church was made up of people that had attended Reverend Tom's church that he was ousted from, or people that had attended the Catholic parish that Steve, Tom's husband, and the music director, he had been ousted too. And so they started a church together, and I went Christmas Eve, and I liked it. So I went back to the next regular service, which was actually on New Year's Day. They didn't hold Christmas Eve was a Saturday. They didn't hold a Christmas Sunday service on Sunday, but the next week, New Year's Day, they had a service, and I went back. And what was interesting was, I had been in all the evangelical, they talk about charismatic liturgy, 3 fast songs, 3 slow songs, right. Prayer, offering, sermon, altar call. Well, I was accustomed to, before that, the Methodist church that I attended, when Parents Methodist Church, followed the more traditional liturgy, where you have a reading, a song, a second reading, another song, gospel reading, and sermon. And you do things like say the Apostles' Creed, say the Lord's Prayer in unison, things like that. And so I was familiar with a liturgy service, but I hadn't attended one for years. And that's what kind of service All Saints had, was a liturgy service. The thing that impressed, it was familiar. And the thing that really impressed me about it is I could see that it was really about Jesus. Tom and Steve and the people that were there because of Jesus. It was not a gay social organization with religious wrappings. Right. It was a real, functional, intentional church.
So let me ask a question. That's awesome. So did you, during your time away before you, and All Saints is the church you pastor now, correct?
Yes, I've often said, if you had told me that night that I would one day pastor the church, I would have probably never come back.
Right. So during the time where you were kind of away from God, or not, actively pursuing, were you doing any type of prayer or just, relationship with, did you maintain some semblance? Or, because what I did was like, okay, God, I'm going to take a little journey now. Just don't forget about me. There was this point where I knew internally that I was a gay woman or lesbian, whatever phrase you want to use, and that no amount of anything was going to change that. And so I've often said it was the most selfish decision I've ever made, to be authentic with who I really was. And it was so much more than it was never about sex. That's a whole different topic. It's about, relationship and how I'm wired and how I connect with people. And I had to make this decision that this was who I was. And because for me, I didn't feel like God would accept me. It had been, barraged in my head that I was basically an abomination. I made this choice of saying, God, I love you, but I'm going to walk away from you. And I remember saying and crying and saying, please don't let go of my hand, please. But yet I can't say that I had relationship with God during those several years where I just kind of, what does the word say, without a, whatever, you cast off restraint. What's the actual?
Without a vision, the people perish.
I had no vision for how I could love God and love my wife. None at all. So I was like, now if Susan was a drinker, which she's not, I might have turned into a raving alcoholic. But the fact that we didn't have alcohol in the house, that saved me a lot. I was never a drug person. I was a celibate person, married to my wife. So I didn't have all those little vices. The only vice I had was like smoking cigarettes and cussing a lot, So for me, I know I made a huge break with God. I didn't pick up my Bible, didn't pick up my guitar or anything. So for you during this time period before you walked back in the All Saints, 2 questions. What was your day-to-day relationship like? And 2, when you went back to the church, did you pick up right where you left off prior, or unpack that a little bit for us, like for our listeners? What does it look like to be somebody who loves God and then just go, okay, I'm done. I've moved across to here. I'm not going to church. I'm not doing anything.
Well, second question first. During that time away, I was like, I really kind of put it on the shelf. It's like, God, if I can't be Christian, and if I can't not be gay, and I can't not be gay and Christian at the same time, I'm just going to put faith on the shelf for a while. I didn't set a period of time while, and I did not pray. I did not repent. I just did not think. I was coming off of 5 years of celibacy, so I had some time to make up. I will leave it at that. And
we'll go back to that gay men.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I fit the stereotype there, although I did not drink.
Stereotypical on us. That's enough said. Okay.
Yeah. Then when I got to the church, the first year, probably 2 years, I just took time to get reacquainted with my faith, get to know the people, and just taking it in. I wasn't ready to jump in, but at that point, I recognized that, these people weren't all hung up on those 4-6 clobber verses and preaching against those. Right. They were more than Jesus loves me and gay is okay, that some affirming churches seem to be. Right. They weren't hung up on the clobber passages. They were really, since they were a liturgical church, they followed the lectionary, so they would preach through the Gospels every year. 1 year it'd be Matthew, 1 year it'd be Luke, another year it'd be Mark and John. So we got a good foundation in Scripture there, and we were reading through the various epistles and Old Testament letters or passages and that. So I got that. In probably 97 or so, I started getting out of the closet my tapes of like Kenneth Copeland, for example. Started listening to them, dug out my books and started reading them again. Started getting reestablished to go beyond where I was at in the church, back basically recovering what I did when I went from the liturgical church in the 70s into the charismatic church.
Right.
And one of the people that I had met through HA was a fellow named Kurt. Yeah, I'd met him at the HA conference in the 80s. And we kept casual contact. And he had moved to Phoenix. And he had also gone through the same situation I did, where he was he was no longer not trying to be gay. He was with another fellow, and we connected, and so we talked, and he told me about attending a gay spirit-filled church in Phoenix, Casa de Cristo, and he told me about this organization called 10.
Okay.
And so I decided to go out to the 10 conference, which was in February that year in Phoenix. Part of it was I wanted to get away from the cold, because Ohio is cold in the winter.
Right. I know. I've visited your house.
Yes.
In the winter.
And part of it was I wanted to see spirit-filled gay Christians, because it's like I couldn't quite. I mean, I
Wrap your head
knew
around
I
it.
was, but I couldn't quite grasp it.
Me too.
And I
Yeah.
went out to this conference, and it was just like I was going to the 70s, 80s churches I was going to, except it was gay men and lesbians leading worship and preaching. And that is actually at that February conference that I met Dale Jarrett.
Okay, that isn't it amazing? It's such a small world. Was that just total freedom for you?
It was it was amazingly eye-opening. Now, Dale at that time was pastoring a church in Washington, D.C.
Right.
Which for me, that's only 6 hours away. And Dale and I had connected on AOL, because that's where
That's
I
where it was
had
at
my
the time.
email, and we
Yeah.
would chat on AOL. And so I made arrangements to go down. And they were worshiping on Saturdays at that point,
Okay.
which was good because I could go down there for a Saturday and then be at my own church Sunday night. So I would leave Friday night. So I went down that early March of 1999. I went down to his church, and I met him, and I met Brenda Johnson,
Okay.
and I started going down there probably every 3 months or so. I would go, I'd make the trip, go down Friday night, get a hotel room, stay over, go to church service Saturday morning, and then drive back to Ohio. And I would do that. And I attended some of their weekend conferences because I wasn't in ministry at that time. So I could attend a weekend conference when they had it.
Right.
And I developed some good friendships in that church. They went through a structural change that they got involved in a organization called Star of Hope.
Right.
And
Which is where I met you.
Yeah, Star of Hope was kind of like a gay version of Christian International, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, that's
because in fact, a lot of the people that were involved in Star of Hope had been through the trainings at Christian International. And so I met those, and it was a Word of Faith organization, and it was a prophetic organization. This is the first time in years I'd seen prophetic call-outs, and I got involved in that. And that was how I met Randy Morgan also.
Right. Yeah, we are all connected that way. So let's fast forward. So you started going to this. Was there any type of a watershed moment where you reconciled your faith? Not just, I've heard that, we all have similar stories. It's the way we play them out that makes our stories unique, but we go through similar emotions. Was there a point where you actually, in your heart, in your spirit, not intellectually, but where you actually went, I know God loves me and I'm okay?
That actually would have probably happened 95, 96 or so. And it's simply because I don't know that I reconciled it theologically. That didn't come till later.
Okay.
But it was a matter of clearly these people love Jesus, and they are completely satisfied with the idea that he loves them too, gay or straight, black or white, and I decided, that was good enough for me.
I think that
so I come to that probably in the late 90s, and that was probably about the time when I started picking up my Bible and started going back to my own Christian roots. Was after I come to that conclusion.
And I think that that's important for our listeners too, because one of the things with these podcasts, and not like I said earlier, maybe when we were just chatting before the show, is not everybody I interview is going to identify as Christian, but for gay and lesbian people, the whole GLBTQI community, we think sometimes we can look at the media and think, oh, all the information's out there, everybody knows they're okay, everybody knows it gets better, but we look at the suicide rate and everything, and we know that not everybody is getting that message. And it's really up to us in any way we can, as far as letting our light shine and everything, to be that message. So one of the things through these podcasts, We'll always have a list of resources and stuff in the show notes or for people, but that's part of it. I'm going on a rabbit trail, but you said something, you saw these people, and that's so important for especially the GLBT youth. They're knowing who they are younger and younger. They're knowing that they don't fit in their body younger and younger. To know that they really are okay. Whether they have a faith tradition or not, there's this internal piece of us that has to be at peace with where we are, of who we are, and knowing that we are perfect, we are beautiful inside, and that we're not broken. And so for you as a Christian man, as a gay man, this is what I'm hearing, which is partly the same experience I had. The theological came much later, before the heart realization that I was okay. Was I met you and Randy and all these other people and Dale, and you start hanging out with people who are comfortable in their skin. They're comfortable. They love God. And so, there is a thing, who you hang around is who you become. If you want to know, just look at your circle of people. If you hang around a bunch of angry people, and unless God put you in there to be the little unicorn light bulb, for the most part, you're going to, it's going to rub off. And so I just wanted to interject that. I think it's so important. We don't have to be like, I'm not a Kathy Baldock, who's such a big affirming presence for the gay community as a straight woman, and that's her mission. It doesn't have to be my mission to go out and say it gets better to everybody, but I do have a responsibility to be a healthy influence around people, and not. So that's one of the things I really want to get through on this podcast, is that people listen, and people that are closeted, because we're going to have closeted people listen to this, or people that have totally given up, maybe either on a relationship with God, or just still in that self-loathing, that it's so important to heal from that point of knowing that you were created perfect and that there's nothing wrong with you. So what do you, before we kind of wrap up this part of it, what do you want to say, just as a man, as a gay man, as somebody who knew they were gay from a young age? What do you want, two questions before we go into our kind of lighthearted part. What do you want other GLBTQI people to know? And I forgot what my other question was. So let's start there. What do you want people to know?
I want them to know that they can have a healthy relationship with Jesus Christ no matter who they are and no matter who they love. I got back into the teaching ministry, which although I'm a pastor, I largely function as a teacher. My sermons are teaching and not just they're encouraging. And part of that's because I when I was listening to Kenneth Copeland and them, I would occasionally hit the problems with their message, at Believers Convention, Kenneth Copeland would make some smack comment about gays, or Gloria Copeland at Healing School. Every week time I went to Healing School, when she started praying for people, she would throw homosexuality and lesbianism out as if it's something to be healed, just like cancer. And then I was at a Joyce Meyer meeting in 2004. This was in the lead up where they were trotting out the gay marriage issue to try to round up people to vote for a president that wasn't real enthusiastic. So they were drumming up all the anti-gay marriage amendments in 2004. And I was sitting there in a Joyce Meyer meeting. Not only did she bring an ex-gay person on at the before they actually started the service to testify. I'm like, okay, been there, done that. I know it doesn't work, and she's going to figure that out someday herself. Right. But then she also made a slap at gays in her actual message. It was a good message. It's a message that I would have bought the DVD for and shared with people if not for that. Right. So I really got involved in my teaching ministry at that point. And I didn't plan to be a pastor. I planned to be a teacher, and just combination of circumstances at All Saint pushed me into the pastor thing. And that's actually kind of comes along where I met Shane. And that's
Yeah.
another whole big story. He wanted to come down for my ordination. Weather didn't allow for him to come out. We'd met on social network, and he came down. We met a couple more times. And then I kind of put on a show because I didn't think I wanted to be in a relationship. And I'm like, do I really want to be in a relationship with someone that's 10 hours away?
Right.
And which I've always shied away from long-term relationships. I'd had enough unpleasant relationships or failed relationships that I didn't think anyone was going to come of it.
Yeah.
Well, we went to Immersed in 2012, and he had gone to Immersed also. And we got reconnected there in person. And a month later, we started dating. And 3 years later, from when we started dating, we got married.
Amen.
So
That's where I met Shane.
So my faith life is what brought me my husband.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, it's, that's the thing is that life has a way of working out. If we start, there's a meme that I've seen before, and it's not about, I'm going to paraphrase. It's not about getting all freaked out in the middle of the struggle. We could even talk about that now with, COVID, but it's about what you're learning through it, because we're all going to go through stuff. But I think it's for this podcast, for this series on this podcast, is so important that for anybody listening or anybody that has friends or family that are GLBT or whatever, that they know that they're okay. As far as that goes. And so I think it helps hearing other people's stories. Now I was about to go into my 3 questions. So a staple of the Authentic Dev podcast, no matter how serious or funny the conversation is I always ask 3 off the wall questions. And then you get to ask me a question. And then we'll make sure at the end that you tell everybody a little bit about whatever projects you have going on, and we'll get all that in the show notes so that if people want to contact you, they can. So you just answered me about Shane, so I got to throw that one out. So Let's ask this one. What did you want to be growing up? Like, what was your childhood? And, mine shifted, but I have a couple. What did you want to be?
I wasn't really settled on any one thing. I got into the computer field, which is my day job, because I was in engineering, and I had to take a computer class, and the engineering wasn't doing it for me, but the computer class was. And I worked in higher ed IT full-time for 32 years, and I'm doing part-time work as a consultant now. But I did not plan at all on being a computer person back in that day.
Did you want to be like a fireman or nothing?
No, fireman didn't do it for me. I had really strong grades but I just didn't really know what I wanted to be.
Okay.
My parents pushed me towards engineering, and
I'm talking like 5 or 6 years old. Like
yeah. But that was like what am I going to do now that I'm coming out of high school? And I had some aptitude for engineering. And so kind of like that just kind of became the default choice.
Okay.
But it was the computer classes in engineering that pushed me to the computer field.
Okay. I was going more like, when you were 5 years old, did you want to be an astronaut? But okay.
I don't remember I don't remember anything like that.
Were you
I don't remember what I wanted to be.
Were you a serious child?
At times, yeah. I just don't remember what I wanted to be back then. I'm 61 now.
I'll let you off the hook. Okay. Yeah. So let's tell us something funny about yourself. What's something bizarre or funny about yourself?
Well, as serious as I am when I'm teaching, I have a quick wit. I had to tame it because it could easily be a biting wit.
Yeah, me too.
But that quick wit sometimes leads to spontaneous humor in my messages, because I'll preach from an outline, but I'll be preaching along, and then something will just hit me, and then I'll put it out there, and all of a sudden there's laughter. And I expected the laughter, but I just did. It's like that wasn't in my notes, but that worked out well.
That's
So that quick wit sometimes sneaks out in my messages, and people that are looking for me to be totally serious, they'll find I'm not.
okay. That's good. So let's see. Let's bring Shane back into it. What do I want to ask? Let's see. I'm thinking about the Newlywed Game. You remember the old Newlywed Game?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll have to ask Shane later. So I'll play a virtual Newlywed Game for you for a moment. Let's see. If I asked Shane, what's your favorite outside of the house thing to do is, besides go to church, what would he say?
Probably eating out.
Okay, eating out.
I'm not an outdoorsy person like he is.
Yeah,
we are
is.
very, very different, and he loves the outdoors. I do it grudgingly. Road trips I enjoy. Taking a road trip.
So would he say
I would
road
say
trip
either
or
road
restaurant?
trips or eating out, but I don't know which one he'd pick. Probably road trips he'd pick.
Road trips. Okay. So I'm going to ask him that next time I see him. And
I think he would be an interesting interviewee because his background is so different from mine.
If he wants to, yeah. I mean, I've kind of got an open call for anybody. Okay. So go ahead. What do you want to ask Authentic Deb? Anything is on the table. I will answer honestly.
If you had to give up either bacon or coffee, which would it be?
Shoot, Doug. You are so wrong for asking me that. Let's see.
I know you. That's why I asked that question.
Oh my gosh. That is so wrong. Oh, I got to think. Listeners, anybody who knows me knows I love bacon and coffee. This is terrible, terrible, terrible. I think I'm probably going to need therapy after this, but I'm going to have to give up the bacon.
Okay.
Did I surprise you?
I wasn't sure. I figured the bacon because it would be bacon simply because the coffee gets you started before you can enjoy the bacon.
Well, and I can have coffee all throughout the day without having to go and cook it and clean up after it. So I was being practical. But, well, Doug, I really enjoyed this conversation. Let us know a little bit what kind of, before we end here, any little projects or anything you want to add that you got going on, how people can get in touch with you or your ministry.
Okay, well, I'm, as I said, pastoring All Saints Community Church. The church is in Cortland, although I live in Youngstown. I'm involved with the Covenant Network based out of Atlanta. I'm getting ready to launch my own podcast. I had a podcast for years that was rebroadcast of my Sunday sermons, but I'm getting ready to launch something different that's going to be a solo, short form, very, 5, 10, 15-minute episodes. I'm getting ready. And that is going to be called Beyond 6 Verses. Beyond SIX Verses. And it's because so many of the affirming people get hung up in trying to battle those 6 verses,
right?
The clobber passages, and they get hung up. Or, like I said, so many of them are Jesus loves me and gay is okay. And so I want to go beyond those 6 verses into the Bible topics and talks that are for all people. You're not going to come to my podcast and hear a slap at gays in it. You're going to hear something encouraging. You're going to hear something biblical. So
Awesome. That's
what my project is. I'm actually getting ready to launch that this week, probably.
I really enjoyed this. It was good to see your face again.
Good to see you too.
I know it's been way too long. I was going to see you this July, but COVID has kind of changed all that. So I just really thank you for being on the podcast, and we will talk soon.
Great.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Authentic Deb podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast and connect with me at authenticdeb.com. There you can book a session with me and request to be a guest on the show. So until next time, this is Authentic Deb signing out. And remember, be you, because being you is enough.